Hello fellow sim racers. If you're watching this at the end of February or the beginning of March in 2020, then I'm busy looking after our newborn baby. But I've pre-recorded some videos for you guys, including this one to celebrate 200 YouTube uploads. Since the channel has grown to the point where I get hundreds of video comments every week, it's unsurprising that there are a few that just keep cropping up again and again. So today I'm going to try and answer as many of the popular questions as possible during the time it took for this race I recorded a couple of weeks ago, but decided not to upload to the channel. Two birds, one stone. So I'm going to start off with some of the real basic stuff that does get asked pretty frequently, but I'm going to try and rattle through it as much as I can so I don't repeat myself too much. Starting off with, where am I from? I currently live in a small village near the Surrey-Hampshire border that's very near Woking, which is where McLaren make their Formula 1 cars, and I mention that fact far too often in the videos to the point where it's almost become a bit of a meme. Next up, what got you started in sim racing? Now, I have told this story a lot, so forgive me, but my first steps into sim racing were on my dad's old computer back in 1992 with Microprose Grand Prix, Jeff Cramman's masterpiece that spawned the series of Grand Prix games that went on beyond that. And really, I've played everything that I could get my hands on since, on consoles, on PC, but it was only really in the last sort of 4 or 5 years that I have started calling it sim racing and taking it a bit more seriously. Next up, what made you start the YouTube channel? Again, I've covered this actually really recently in the 2-year anniversary video, so I won't go into it in too much detail, but basically there were a whole bunch of Assetto Corsa mods that nobody seemed to be making videos about on YouTube, and I wanted to see what I could do to bring a bit more attention to them. It's really as simple as that. And the last of the questions that gets asked absolutely all the time, real basic personal stuff, is what do I do for a living? Well, my background is in marketing. I have a degree in photography and went on to work in marketing throughout my career. So my wife and I started a marketing firm a few years ago, and that's what I do to earn my wage. But YouTube has been taking up more and more time and is starting to earn a small amount of money as well, so it looks very much like this is going to be the future. Now I'm going to move on to a series of questions about the YouTube stuff and what I do with the channel. Starting with, why didn't you review blank? Well, first of all, I don't really consider the videos I make about mods and other content on YouTube to be reviews. I see them more as showcases. I'm not really here to give consumer advice, and honestly, diving into some of the real deep detail is just beyond what I'm interested in doing on YouTube. But as to why I will cover something and not something else is usually down to one of two things: timing and my interest in the subject. So, for example, the Nordschleife for R Factor 2 came out in, I think, September last year, and is very much the sort of thing that I would have loved to have covered on the channel. But as it was released, I was on my way to the airport to get on a plane to go to Barcelona for the SRO eSport. And I was there for 5 days, I think, and it takes a couple of days to make a video. So by the time I was home and ready to make a video about the Nordschleife, it was almost a week later. Everyone else had already made their videos, and it can be quite demotivating to actually go and make a video about something that everyone else has already covered. Next up, why don't you do more racing in your videos? Now, I would love to spend my time just making racing videos, but that's not really what the channel was about, and it's certainly not what it's grown into. I have a huge respect for people that have managed to make a success doing primarily racing-based stuff like Jimmy and Jardier, etc. Those guys do an amazing job of it. I am nowhere near on the same level of being able to commentate with the same sort of fluidity and passion that someone like Jimmy does while I'm racing, so I try and limit that content because, honestly, other people do it better. Next up is something that I get on almost every video, and it's someone asking about what the name of the piece of music in the video is. And the simple answer is I make all of the music myself, so they've got really catchy song titles like Demo 34 or whatever, so that's not very helpful. Also, it means that, I assume people are asking what the song's called because they want to go and find it on Spotify or whatever, and unfortunately you can't because I haven't made any of it available. People have asked if I'm going to make some of the music publicly available, and it's quite interesting, but the reality is I quite often make the 30 or 60 second snippet of music I need for that part of the video, and the idea never gets developed beyond that. So they're not really very complete, and they're not really designed to be put out as a body of work. So it would be an enormous amount of work to go and produce something, an EP or an album or whatever, or even just a ramshackle collection of songs that I'd be happy with. So I'm not ruling it out, but right now I'm focusing on other things. Next up is people asking whether I will make a video about their mod and, how much it would cost. And, well, there are two parts to that. Dealing with the first part first, if you've made something that you're really proud of and, this amazing thing for the community and you're giving it away for free or whatever, then please do drop me an email about it. Don't bother messaging me on Facebook or Instagram because I get loads of notifications on those platforms and it's hard to weed out the important stuff from the spam. But if you've made something, drop me an email. It's in the video descriptions and I'd love to talk about it. And if it's something that I'm interested in and I can find time in the schedule, I would love to feature it on the channel. Now, the second part, no, absolutely. No, there is absolutely no way that I would accept payment for making a video about a mod. It's completely crazy to me. Someone has to go to the effort of putting thousands of hours of work into creating this thing for, say, Assetto Corsa or R-Factor, and then some idiot that makes YouTube videos and spends 16 or 20 hours on them asks for money. No, it's morally reprehensible, and the idea, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. Next up, why don't you make more videos about R-Factor 2 or iRacing? Well, that's actually two questions, and because I formatted them, I've got no one else to blame on that one. So let's tackle R-Factor 2 first. The reason I don't make more videos about R-Factor 2, or at least recently, is because the releases haven't been that exciting to me. A couple of notable exceptions, like Monaco Circuit and Nordschleife, but the cars, for example, which are prime content for making videos about on YouTube, well, a lot of them have been replication of what's going on in other sims. A lot of GT3 cars, for example, last year. And that's been done to death in Assetto Corsa Competizione, and I've made loads of videos about them, so it's just not that interesting to me. The other side of the coin is that R-Factor 2 isn't the best looking sim, and making the sort of cinematic videos that I like making in it and getting it to look the way I want can be a bit challenging. As for iRacing, the big problem is just that most of it's online. While the AI has been rolled out recently, and they're doing the slow rollout with various bits of content, it's not fully there yet. But I'm exploring new ways to make videos in that, and it's an exciting tool for me, actually. I've been playing around a lot with the NASCAR content as well, which is really fun. Hopefully a video about that soon. Now let's move on to a series of questions that are basically asking my opinion on sim racing things, because for some reason you guys want to know my opinion. Anyway, starting with what's the best racing sim? And the complex answer to this is that I don't have one, or that it changes all the time. Pick whichever one you like. Right now I'm finding it hard to drive anything other than Assetto Corsa Competizione. They've done an amazing job with the recent updates to get the physics into a place where just driving those cars feels very natural and very good. Now, it's obviously only got GT3 cars, so if I want to go and do single-seaters, I've got to go elsewhere, and R-Factor or Assetto Corsa or where I would go for that. So really, just it depends on the content I want to drive at the time, and I think I'm really looking forward to Automobilista 2 for that very fact as well. So you can hear I'm struggling to answer that question because I don't really have a favourite sim. The majority of my hours are in Assetto Corsa, but that's because I've made the most videos about it because I got known for making Assetto Corsa mods. Beyond that, it's probably in order Assetto Corsa Competizione, R-Factor 2, iRacing, all about the same amount. So it's a fairly broad church as far as I'm concerned. Next up is another one that I keep being asked, and what's the best PC sim to get started on? And now I've done a video about this last year, and to be honest, my opinion hasn't changed. If you're just getting started in sim racing, then you do well to look at Race Room and Project Cars 2, I think, are probably the best starting points, just because they've got the least friction to get involved with. Pretty much plug it in and go. Other sims that I really enjoy more than that have a higher barrier to entry. For example, Assetto Corsa requires a large number of mods really to get the best out of it these days. R-Factor 2 is just quite impenetrable, and learning all of its quirks can be a bit difficult. When the new UI comes out, when the new UI comes out, put my teeth in, things might be a bit easier in that regard. iRacing has a huge cost barrier to entry, but actually once you get into it, it makes a lot of sense. So, and of course, we've got Automobilista 2 coming, which could well take the crown. Next up is what sim racing equipment do I use? And the simple and really boring answer is that it's all down in the video description. The next couple of questions are about equipment I used to use and I've stopped using. The first being, why did I stop using VR? And the really simple but boring answer is that it didn't play well with the videos I was making. The VR mirrored image that you get on the screen just wasn't of a quality level that I thought was really acceptable for the channel, and it was starting to detract from the types of videos I was beginning to make, the stupid cinematic stuff. And it just didn't really fit. Now, I love racing in VR. In fact, I got to try out a Rift S on a professional rig setup the other day that I had a really good time with and found quite difficult to tear myself away from. I really do enjoy VR as a driving experience, but it just doesn't fit that well with the video making side of things for me. And the same can be said for the triple screens. Yeah, they took up a huge amount of room, and that was a bit of a downside in this small room that I've got to dedicate to my sim racing and video making stuff. But the real issue was just that when you're pushing, it was nearly 6K worth of pixels. I was running three 1440p screens. There's a big performance overhead in that, which took away from the video making side of things. Back when I was still capturing video on the same PC that I was racing on. It becomes even more complicated if you want to capture from a secondary PC as well when running triples. So really it just, as I got more into video making, the triple screens and the VR became less practical for day-to-day use, at least in my opinion. Now, the final question in the opinion section is, what do I think about racing esports? Now, there's a lot to unpack there, and I have sort of rolled a lot of different questions into one. First things first, I think it's, as an advert for sim racing, I think it's amazing. There are some notable issues at the moment that I think need to be solved, and I'm probably not the best person to talk about that. There are a lot of drivers out there that are quite vocal about the issues on their side of the fence. But as someone who, I guess, works in the media side of esports a little bit and the media side of sim racing, my issue is that it's still unclear to me, outside of the absolute biggest series, where the audience is. So you look at F1 esports, and they obviously have a big audience that's being pushed from the F1 side of things. Being on the official F1 YouTube channel definitely helps there. And the same to some extent with the Gran Turismo stuff as well, because they've got a really broad, multinational, baked-in fan base to start from and grow from. Other series that are smaller, it's very difficult to understand who is supposed to be watching that and where the audience is going to come from, because I'm sure it can't have escaped everyone else's notice that really sim racers are quite skeptical of esports, and that's where I think a lot of these questions come from, is from a position of skepticism. And I share a lot of those feelings as well. I don't want to talk about it in too much detail here, because it's very much a video I want to make in the future, talking about some of these issues, and hopefully I can get someone else that I've got in mind from the industry to come and talk about it, and we can talk through some of the issues on an episode of Talking Sims. That sounds nice, doesn't it? Now, moving on, and we're going to round out the series of questions with some of the non-sim racing stuff that I get asked all the time. And the first is, and probably the most confusing of all, is what's the deal with the hat? Honestly, I didn't realise this was going to become a talking point. First of all, it's more than one hat. You can't just have one hat. That'd be ludicrous. It's baffling to me that anyone asked the question. The hat, really simply, is it keeps my head warm. It's the purpose of hats. It also keeps the bright lights from being directly in my eye. It doesn't really do that, I'm lying. But I don't know, I just like the hat. Just leave the hat alone, yeah? I also get a lot of questions about the tattoos. The ones you'll see on the channel, on my right arm I've got a crow, and on my left arm I've got a Porsche 956 outline with a sort of impressionistic view of the Nordschleife on it to sort of echo the Stefan Beloff lap record, which has now been broken and renders the tattoo entirely pointless. But I'll, if I remember in the edit, I'll put some pictures of those up, because just showing them on the camera here, I'll just get lots of white reflections off the lights. Next up, what kind of movies and music and that kind of thing do I like? Well, I'll tackle music first because I'm very much a music guy. I've been in bands all of my life, and obviously I make all the music for the videos as well, so it's something that's a big part of my life. I listen to almost everything from sort of alt-rock to punk, hip-hop, electronica, post-rock, all sorts. But really it's that sort of alt-rock and punk thing has always been a core, something that's always stuck with me. Bands I'm listening to a lot right now are Manchester Orchestra, Oso Oso, The World is a Beautiful Place, etc. That kind of thing is where I'm at the moment. And as for movies, it's a similarly broad church, but I'm a big fan of the films of Paul Thomas Anderson. Next up, what's my favourite racing series? Well, I guess in terms of number of races watched, it's almost certainly Formula One. I've been watching since I was 8, which is too many years to think about, really, since 1991. I don't know, I'm getting a bit confused now. It must have been 7, actually. But I've been watching since the German Grand Prix in 1991, and my interest has wavered a little bit over the years, but I still watch the vast majority of Formula One races. But I think if I had to pick a series that most often delivered exactly what I was looking for, it would be IMSA, whether that's WeatherTech Sports Car Championship or whoever was sponsoring it previously in previous incarnations. I don't know, there's just something about those particular cars on those classic American tracks that really delivers. And I think that it's the circuits that are a big deal, actually, because it's essentially the same cars as the World Endurance Championship. But while WEC goes to FIA Grade 1 Formula 1 style venues most of the time, the IMSA stuff is all held on these narrow, very old school circuits, which in theory there shouldn't be any good racing, there shouldn't be any chance to overtake because they're all tiny, loads of them are tiny. But it's always brilliant, like always brilliant. And finally, do I have any hobbies outside of sim racing? Well, I certainly used to. This whole sim racing YouTube thing has become an absolute behemoth of a time sink. But I think outside of this and music, which I've mentioned in a couple of the responses already, I've always had an interest in making things. I guess the word for it these days is maker. But I've always sort of had an interest in electronics and building models and all sorts of things. So I used to build guitar pedals, and I made props, replica movie props for a while. I got into 3D printing, and basically any hobby that requires stupid amount of tools, time, and expense has generally attracted me one way or another. I used to be into RC cars and planes. I worked at a model shop for a while as well, so that was a really bad decision from trying to save any sort of money and not just immediately spend my paycheck perspective. Anyhow, guys, that pretty much brings us to the end of today's video. Thank you so much for bearing with me while I'm doing the new dad thing and the channel's a little bit disruptive. So, I said disruptive, didn't I? I really meant disrupted. Anyway, I'm going to keep that in because, I'm running out of time to redo more takes. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.